Hello, welcome to the Brazilian Health Nut Show. Here you will find cutting-edge information provided by the best experts in the world so you can learn how to burn fat for the rest of your life. Bruno de Gama is the Brazilian health nut in a mission to solve the problems you have when trying to lose weight forever. He is a nutritional therapy practitioner, a certified personal trainer, and a holistic lifestyle coach by the Czech Institute. Don't forget to say hello and sign up to our free newsletter at www.brazilianhealthnut.com. Let's go!
All right, thank you so much for being here with me today, Ben. I super appreciate your time. Would you tell a little bit about your background first, your story, and how did you become one of the top health influencers in the world, man?
Yeah, well, I guess I first got interested in fitness and sports and athletics and even nutrition to a certain extent when I was in high school and discovered the sport of tennis. And I really wanted to be a very good tennis player. And before that, I'd played soccer and basketball and baseball and all these other sports, but tennis really seemed to be something that I wanted to get really good at. So I bought little 10-pound dumbbells and I started to run the hills behind my house, and I started to, pay attention to maybe having a salad every day. And it eventually got to the point where I got good enough to play in college, and just like any, or at least most of the athletes playing any sport in college, I decided I was going to be an exercise science major. So for 4 years, I studied exercise science and nutrition. Fell in love with it, got a master's degree in biochemistry and biomechanics, the movement of the human body. And after a brief stint kind of looking into going into medical school, I decided to stay with fitness, and I opened up a lot of personal training studios and gyms in Washington State and Idaho here in the U.S., and spent nearly 7 years really digging into the science of exercise at a very high level. So, for example, my personal training facility, we had a metabolic analysis equipment for analyzing resting metabolic rate and exercise metabolic rate. We had echocardiograms or electrocardiograms for measuring heart function during exercise, high-speed video cameras for analyzing run gait, and bicycle fitting. We did a lot of blood work in terms of looking not just at what's going on outside the body, but what's going on inside the body. Most of that kind of culminated in 2008 with me being voted as America's top personal trainer, just based on a lot of these kind of outside the box things I was doing to get results for people, from everything from fat loss to physical performance to even longevity and anti-aging. And then after that, I wound up becoming more of like an author and a speaker, and eventually kind of stopped doing a lot of like the one-on-one personal training, and instead kind of ventured more into doing what I do now, which is, I do a lot of consulting with people online, people all over the world, via Skype and via phone. I do a lot of, podcasting, and I write articles at bengreenfieldfitness.com. And I write books, and that's generally what I do now. But really, I've shifted a lot of my focus to helping people not just get good bodies or look good naked or whatever you want to call it, but also achieve at the same time really good performance, not just of the body, but also good performance of the brain, of the mind, of the gut, of sexual health, and then also anti-aging and longevity, right? Who wants to look good and feel good if you are going to be dead in a few years, So I've really tried to begin to unlock a lot more of the doors that lead to the combination of health, performance, and longevity, and that's kind of what I do now.
Gotcha. Awesome. That's a nice journey. I play tennis and soccer as well, so we should play sometime.
Yeah.
I used to play a lot of tennis, and now I'm more on soccer because, it's Yeah, I'm from Brazil. I still have this
Yeah.
feeling, here it's just soccer, soccer, soccer. Nobody
Yeah.
plays tennis. So,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I do want to come to Brazil someday. It's
yeah.
definitely a country I've heard a lot of good things about, and I love South America. And my kids take Spanish every day at school, and so I need an excuse to have them go
Hmm.
and practice
Yeah, even though,
even though you
you
guys are
speak Portuguese,
Portuguese.
right?
Yeah, I remember because a lot of my teammates in college they spoke Portuguese because they were Brazilian tennis players. So that's one of the things I spent or I heard a lot for 4 years. Vamos, vamos,
Vamos.
come on,
Yeah,
vamos,
exactly. Every time you want a point, it's just vamos,
vamos,
vamos.
vamos.
Yeah, that's the command for people who don't know. So, Ben, you start your book Beyond Training with a phrase that goes more or less like this: athletes are unhealthy, and so a lot of people, when they try to lose weight, they go and they look into exercise, and especially, oh, I should exercise like an athlete because they're pretty healthy, and that's a good way to lose weight. And actually, right before here this interview, I was just talking to my brother, and I was like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to the gym." And I was like, "Didn't you just go in the morning?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going again. I wanted to do more is better." So I was like, "Oh, we gotta talk later. I have to talk to Ben Greenfield here. He's gonna give you some advice on that." So what's your take on this? The exercising a lot. I know we could just talk the whole show, but can you just give like a summary in terms of philosophy around exercise, please?
Well, here's the deal. Exercise is misperceived as something that we need in order to stay fit or in order to be healthy. Now, for example, while I am talking to you right now, I'm walking on my treadmill. And for many of my phone calls and consults and some of my writing today, etc., I'll walk on my treadmill. And so by the end of the day, I will maybe have stood or walked or lunged or kneeled or been in any other variety of positions that I'll adopt during the day for 6 to 8 hours. That's just low
Mm-hmm.
level physical activity. I'll also go get the mail and I'll sprint back up the driveway after I get the mail. And,
Right.
I started off my morning today with 50 push ups and 50 squats. And, I'll follow my rule of, whenever I go and I use the bathroom, I'll do 10 squats. And so, by the time I get to the end of the day, I don't have to exercise. Right. I've been moving all day long. And so that's the first thing to realize is that if you hack your environment so that you indeed are moving all day long, fitness becomes an option. Some of the fittest people I know don't step into a gym. My father-in-law, who is a sheep rancher, right? He
Yeah.
works outside all day with his hands and his body. He doesn't need to go to the gym. My brother works as a farmer and he's out in the wheat field all day, or else he's cutting down trees when he's logging in the summer, and he doesn't go to the gym either. My wife, she spends much of her day gardening and farming and taking care of our goats and chickens and working in the house, and she does other things like she plays tennis, for example, but she also doesn't do much formal exercise at all. And all these people I'm talking about, they're fit. And,
Mm-hmm.
Granted, if you want to do an Ironman triathlon, or you want to run a marathon, or you want to compete in the CrossFit games, you'll still need to get to the end of an active day like that, or start the beginning of an active day like that with some type of formal exercise routine. But for me, personally, that formal exercise routine for me, racing professionally in obstacle course racing,
Yeah.
that's 30 to 60 minutes of exercise that I'll do at the end of the day after a day of just with low level physical activity. And it's always shocking to see how little you can get away with when it comes to really beating up your body in the gym or on the court or, wherever else you happen to work out, if you have low level physical activity all day long. And when you look at
Right.
even like some of the more fit cross country skiers or marathoners or triathletes on the face of the planet, many of them use this training approach that I talk about in my book called the polarized training approach, meaning they exercise with about 80% of their time at a very low level, conversational, aerobic intensity.
So
Very
pretty much just moving around a lot.
very similar to what a non-professional athlete might experience when just figuring out ways in their lives that they can move around a lot. And then about 20% of their training is extremely high intensity, but for very short periods of time, really hard interval training. And, we can simulate that to a certain extent in our lives if we spend much of our lives, fooling our bodies into thinking that they're hunting and gathering and farming and gardening, even if we are just, standing instead of sitting at a computer or using a treadmill or stopping every hour to do some jumping jacks. And then at the beginning or the end of the day, we put the icing on the cake with a very high intensity cardio session or a very high intensity weight training session. And when you do that, you don't have to spend, as for example, I used to go to the gym for 2 to 4 hours a day. When I was bodybuilding, I used to work out for no less than 90 minutes a day when I was first doing Ironman triathlon before I discovered, these type of things that I'm talking about now. And yeah, it can be tough on the body. It can create a lot of inflammation because if you think about it, what you're doing is you're shoving a huge amount of stress into a relatively short period of time rather than spreading that stress at a lower intensity throughout the day. And when you shove all that stress into a short period of time, you create oxidation, inflammation, connective tissue damage, very large releases of norepinephrine and adrenaline and cortisol, and many biochemical responses that can accelerate aging or can accelerate stress or can disrupt sleep or can even cause things like heart scarring. There's this concept called the athlete's heart that occurs in many cases in athletes who spend a lot of time with both voluminous and also intense exercise. And that combination of volume and intensity appears to actually have, ironically, some negative cardiovascular implications when it comes to the health of your heart. So those are some of the things to think about when it comes to, how often you spend time at the gym exercising versus how often you spend time just kind of like engaged in low-level physical activity with less frequent visits to, say, the gym.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's pretty similar to my routine and to the one that I promote. I move around a lot. So like you just said, every time I have the opportunity, I'm moving, I'm doing something with my body. And then I probably lift like twice a week, once sometimes. And then I do a sprinting every 7 to 10 days. That's pretty much it right now for the routine that I have. And I feel really good. And I think it's enough. So let's talk about something that I haven't talked to anyone, which is circadian rhythm. And I think that's a very, very important topic for people who want to lose weight and not many people are talking about. Can you please define what is this for people who don't know?
Well, your circadian rhythm is simply the 24-hour clock that your body responds to. And circadian rhythm and that clock, it's adjusted or responds to everything from when you eat and how much you eat when you do eat, when you exercise and how often and how much you exercise, when you see light or even when your skin gets exposed to light, when you see dark and when your skin is exposed to dark. When you go to the bathroom and when you suppress the urge to go to the bathroom and don't go, all these things affect your circadian rhythm, your body's biological clock. And so the idea here is that if you can normalize your circadian rhythm, have a body clock rhythm that is the way that the human body has for thousands of years been exposed to and adjusted to respond optimally to, then a lot of hormones that are tied to the circadian rhythm become normalized. For example, the hormone leptin, which can allow fat to be released from your storage adipose tissue to be burnt as energy. That hormone, your body will be more responsive to if your circadian rhythm is normal. The same could be said for ghrelin, a hormone that makes you hungry. That tends to decrease when circadian rhythm is optimized. There's another hormone.
Cortisol and melatonin also, right? Those are two very important ones.
Sure. Cortisol tends to be lower typically when circadian rhythm is normalized, although there are certain times of the day when cortisol will accelerate, such as the morning, and that's normal, and that's when you would want it to accelerate versus, say, the evening. There is the other hormone I was talking about, leptin, that can also be responsible not just for fatty acid release, but also for appetite control. Insulin, a hormone which is responsible for shoving nutrients into, among other places, fat tissue. Insulin is released in lower amounts, and your body is more responsive to those lower amounts of insulin when your circadian rhythm is normalized. And so, if you are living your life, say, eating breakfast at different times whenever you do eat breakfast, like sometimes at 8, sometimes at 11, sometimes at 9, and you are exposing your body to large amounts of light in the evening, such as cell phones, but not very much light in the morning, such as, say,
So,
sunshine, and you don't have any level of physical activity during the day, or the time that you actually do engage in like that shorter high intensity exercise we talked about, that's sporadic, right? Like sometimes it's afternoon and sometimes it's noontime, etc. All of those things can actually add up to dysregulate your circadian rhythm. And so it's very interesting. There's a book called The Power of Habit, and it has nothing to do with the circadian rhythm. It just goes into how healthy
yeah, yeah.
habits are for the human body. But it turns out that a lot of times these same habits that help us out with productivity and personal health, they can also help us out quite a bit with circadian rhythm. It's why when I get up in the morning, the first thing that I do is I will go through my habit of, gratitude journaling and slowly getting out of bed and stretching and doing some foam rolling, and then I move on and I train my body to have a bowel movement in the morning when that is the time of day when the circadian rhythm dictates you should be doing that. And then I expose my body to sunlight, or if there's no sunlight, some other form of light, like blue light. They make in-ear phototherapy or special eyeglasses that will emit blue light. And so I get my body exposed to that early in the day. And then I move on and I have breakfast typically around the same time every morning. And I have lunch around 1:30, and I have a nap approximately 5 to 7 hours after I wake. I nap for 20 to 30 minutes. And then in the evening, I keep the lights off in certain rooms where there are special light bulbs that have lots of blue light in them, and I instead only use the light bulbs that produce red light. And at the same time, I'll even wear glasses that block blue light, which is very much like sunlight, which I shouldn't be seeing at night coming from my computer and my phone. And then I'll go to bed at approximately the same time every night. And if necessary, I'll even use things like melatonin or magnesium or cannabidiol, or things that will help to shove my body into that sleep state more readily. And I do all of this so that my body's biological clock, so that 24-hour circadian rhythm that you've referred to is optimized. And when it does, the pros outweigh the cons, but there are cons. For example, if I want to go to a party on Friday night, well, I've trained my body to kind of get tired at 10, and I've also trained it to wake readily at 6 a.m., which means if I stay at that party, dancing or partying or drinking or whatever until 2 a.m., my body's still going to wake up at 6 a.m., and then I have to kind of, I have to readjust that circadian clock. Or if I travel, if you travel, you do need to pay attention to that circadian clock. So, for example, if I live in Washington State, and if I've been traveling and I've been spending lots of time back east in, say, New York City, that means that when I'm in Washington State and I wake up and it's 7 a.m. in New York City, where I've been waking up for a few days because that's where I was traveling to, that means it's only 4 a.m. in Washington State because it's 3 hours earlier. And so I have to readjust my circadian rhythm. So what do? Well, if I have to get out of bed, which is many cases that, rather than just simply laying there for 3 hours doing nothing because the body is wide awake, I'll get out of bed. But what I'll do is I'll put on blue light blocking glasses and I'll keep myself as much in the dark as possible until 7. And if I'm working on my computer, I'll dim my computer. And then once 7 rolls around, I'll just step outside and get bursts of sunlight that send my body the message that, hey, right now is the morning. And even just doing that for 1 or 2 days, all of a sudden helps to send my body the message that, hey, here's the new biological clock that you're on. And of course, you can do that in reverse. The same could be said for eating, right? Even though I'd normally eat 2 hours after I get up, if I get up at 4 a.m. because my body is still on the New York City clock, I won't eat at 6 a.m., right? I'll restrict my body's feeding until like 9 a.m. So it gets used again to that normal circadian rhythm. So you always want to think about light. You want to think about the timing of food. You want to think about the timing of exercise. You want to think about the timing of your bowel movement. And once you start to put all those things together that circadian rhythm is tied to, you can really normalize your circadian rhythm, even if you do travel a lot.
Yeah, I use the glasses here in Brazil, and people think I'm crazy. Like, what the fuck is that?
Really? Well, they
don't know what it is. Then I have to explain the reason. Hey guys, what's up? Bruno Gama here, Brazilian Health Nut, and let's take a little break from the show because I would like to offer you something. If you go to my website, www.brazilianhealthnut.com, and click on the page Burn Fat Forever, you can go ahead and claim your free consultation with me right now, okay? Or you can just send me an email at brazilianhealthnut@gmail.com. So you can start to lose weight and feel healthier right now, okay? So go ahead and claim your free consultation with me, and remember that spots are limited, okay? Now let's get back to the show. So let's move on here, and I would love to talk about another topic that nobody's talking when the weight loss, right? About weight loss, which is breathing. And let me just share 2 small stories here. First one, when I was doing my holistic lifestyle coaching with Polchek, and I had a good background in terms of nutrition when I was doing the course. So there was not many things new for me on that part, but there was a lot of emphasis on the breathing part. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I never really pay attention to. And another one, when I was in New York City, actually, I was in a public library, and I was that's like probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I got a book. The book was Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, right? And I was checking out the book, and the lady looked at the book, and like, you know why people get fat? And she was like, I said, why? And she's like, because people don't breathe. And I was like, okay, cool. I never heard that before. So that stuck in my mind. So, on your book, the Beyond Training that you just mentioned before, you have a good part about the importance of breathing. So how do we know if you're doing wrong, and what can we do to get better with the breathing, our skills to breathe, right? Because it's pretty natural.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on breathing probably, but here's the basics. Your chest has baroreceptors in it, pressure receptors that, if activated, cause you to release cortisol. And what this means is that shallow chest breathing, which many people engage in during the day, it causes them to be in a stressed out state. And furthermore, when you don't engage in deep diaphragmatic breathing from your belly, you limit the amount of oxygen and glucose and nutrients and other things that can get delivered to tissue, because you limit blood flow and you limit oxygen availability. Now, the other thing that's important to realize, in addition to deep diaphragmatic breathing, is the concept that when you breathe nasally through your nose, you have turbines in your nose that help to clean the air, help to humidify the air, help to oxygenate the air. And so in an ideal scenario, deep nasal, diaphragmatic breathing is one of the best things that you can train your body to subconsciously do throughout the day. How do you do that? Well, I start off each of my days with 5 minutes of very deep, focused breathing as I lay in bed. It's a perfect time to do it. And that sets the standard for the rest of the day. Now, I go above and beyond. When I mentioned that I'll do things like foam rolling and yoga when I first get up in the morning, I will continue to breathe like that during those activities, so that type of breathing is something I continue to do more unconsciously or subconsciously throughout the rest of the day without having to think about it. Now, in addition, even when you exercise, you can limit the potential for exercise to be stressful or to be um, overly stimulating to your sympathetic, your fight or flight nervous system. If you even play around with things like nasal, deep diaphragmatic breathing when you exercise, I mean, just try
Yeah.
this the next time you go to the
I just
gym.
did actually. I just
Yeah.
did actually. I was reading a book last week, and I was like, "Yeah, let me try this." I pay attention to, but not too much. And then, yeah, it's a huge difference.
Squats, deadlifts, you'd be surprised at the number of exercises you can do breathing through your nose and deep from the belly. Now, granted, treadmill sprints, Tabata sprints on a bicycle, hard kettlebell intervals, rope work, stuff like that. You get to a point where your nose is a limiter and you have to breathe through your mouth. But unless you get to that certain point where you're just sucking air, it can actually be very, very helpful from a standpoint of decreasing cortisol, to increasing oxygen, to increasing the activity of your relaxation parasympathetic nervous system, to breathe nasally using deep diaphragmatic breathing. The other thing that I use quite a bit is rhythmic breathing, because I am a chronic repetitive motion athlete, meaning I run and I bike. And so what rhythmic breathing involves is, for example, you would breathe one breath in for 2 foot strikes, and then one breath out for the next foot strike, and then one breath in for 2 foot strikes, and one breath out for the next foot strike. So you might adjust your pace and go 3 breaths in and then 2 breaths out. There's a really good book about this called Running on Air by an author named Bud Coates. And that's something I'll use a lot when I run, to kind of achieve almost like this Zen-like relaxation state when I run. And so I'll use breath work when I run. I'll use breath work when I lift. I wake up and do breath work. And then also, if I am doing something like sitting in the sauna, I'll use a different form of breathing. Like sometimes I'll do box breathing, right, which is a great way to decrease stretch. And that's 4 counts in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, 4 count hold. Another form of breathing that I'll do sometimes will be body warming type of breathing. That would be before I'll do like a cold soak or a cold water swim or a cold shower. And that's basically more of the type of breathing made popular by this guy named Wim Hof, where you would breathe in and then out not very much, then in and out not very much. And you do that like 30 times, like, and then you'd fully exhale all your oxygen to blow off a bunch of carbon dioxide. And when you blow off all that carbon dioxide, it has kind of like a warming effect on the body. And so that's another form of breath work. Another thing you can do is to increase your ability to be able to hold your breath, or to be able to withstand low oxygen or periods of hypoxia, where you, for example, do swim repeats without breathing, or you download like one of these apps that's called an apnea app. A lot of free divers use this, an apnea app, to your phone, and it has you hold your breath for a certain period of time and then breathe, and then hold your breath for a certain period of time and breathe. And I'll even do these type of things when I'm watching a movie, or when I'm just like sitting around and not doing anything, and the only thing I can do is work on my breathing, like on an airplane. So and then the other thing you can do that's really cool for your inspiratory and expiratory muscles, and also for breath work, is resisted breathing. So this would be like using a training mask, or using another one that they have is called a power lung. And these are things that you would breathe in and out of that increase your resistance to inspiration and expiration. And those can be really good for strengthening your diaphragm, or for increasing the endurance in your inspiratory and your expiratory muscles. And those have a lot of implications for athletes, for example, who want to be able to breathe more efficiently during exercise or during competition. So, yeah, being cognizant that breathing goes way beyond just like moving air in and out of your mouth, for sure.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. Thank you for all the tools here. So let's change a little bit towards food. So I haven't talked to anybody yet on the show about soy. And when I moved to New York 6.5 years ago, probably 7 years ago, I had a friend, Diego, from Switzerland, and he came to me and like, "Oh, Bruno, we should buy this soy protein. Instead of whey protein, you should buy soy protein." I was like, "Okay, I didn't know anything at all about nutrition. I haven't said anything." So I was like, "Cool, let me check it out." So I bought it and I started taking this. And nowadays I have a completely different opinion about this whole subject, and I would love to get your opinion about the soy. Should we have, and how if we have, what's the preparation? Just a little summary on what you think about the soy subject, which is huge here in Brazil. It's a huge the farm for soy. The production is crazy. So
Yeah.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, soy can be a good plant-based source of protein, just as can legumes or seeds or nuts. And just like any plant, soy needs to be considered in terms of what it does to your body when you consume it. For example, if you look at another plant like quinoa, for example, quinoa is a great protein-rich plant that the body can use as a good energy source, and it's got amino acids and minerals and fatty acids in it. But the problem is that it has a coating on it, a soap-like coating called saponins, which make it resistant to digestion or irritable to the digestive tract of a mammal. And that's a survival mechanism. It would mean that theoretically, a mammal that consumed quinoa would poop it out somewhere else, relatively undigested, so that quinoa plant could continue to grow, right? So there's defense and survival worked into many plants. Potatoes and the alkaloids on the skin of potatoes can act similarly. That's why some people have issues eating eggplants or potatoes or tomatoes. They might get joint pain, and so they may be people who do better if they peel the potato. So it's not like you quit eating quinoa, right? You soak the quinoa before you eat it, and you rinse it to get rid of the saponins. Or it's not like you quit eating potatoes. Maybe you just peel the potato, so it has less of an issue with your joints. But when it comes to something like soy, the same thing could be said. For example, soy has some things in it that can inhibit mineral absorption in your gut. It has some phytic acids in it and some other digestive irritants in it that can be removed or downregulated via the process of fermenting the soy. The same way as you would ferment milk to make yogurt, soy can be fermented to make like soybeans can be fermented to make natto, or soy can be fermented to make a tempeh. There are other forms of soy like miso or miso paste. That's another good form of fermented soy. And all of those still give you a lot of the proteins that soy has, a lot of those good plant-based proteins without a lot of the digestive inhibition. And so that's one thing that you want to look at is the soy fermented like miso or miso or natto or tempeh, or is it unfermented as you would get in like the more popular forms of like soy milk or tofu? The other thing to bear in mind with soy is, if you are, for example, a man and you struggle with excess body fat, especially like areas that would indicate where your excess body fat is linked to high levels of estrogen, like man boobs, for example, or low levels of testosterone, or perhaps you've even had your blood tested and you have high levels of estradiol or estrogens. Well, soy can have a little bit of what's called a phytoestrogenic effect, meaning it can introduce estrogens into the human body. And so for a guy who's trying to lose weight or has a lot of body fat deposition, they may want to consider limiting the amount of both fermented and unfermented soy that they eat. Or for a woman who has estrogen dominance, which would mean like high levels of body fat, or maybe a lot of hair growth and, like the upper lip and other areas of the body, and just appears to be kind of like in this pro-growth state. Well, certainly personal care products have estrogens in them. Household cleaning chemicals have estrogens in them. Plastic water bottles and styrofoam have estrogens in them, but so do some plants. And soy is a perfect example of that. And so that would be another population, like a woman who's trying to lose body fat. And if that body fat is linked to estrogen dominance or high levels of estrogen, that would be another person who'd want to really limit the amount of soy that they consume. So, I personally would say that I have soy, typically from like a miso or a natto or a tempeh source, about once, maximum twice a week, and that's about as much soy as I eat. But I mean, you could, I have moderation in a lot of my food, like meat. I don't eat meat every day. I eat meat once every 2 to 3 days, just because, granted, meat is a great protein and it's tasty. and it's good for, building muscle, for example. But there's a lot of evidence that shows that meat in very, very high amounts can have an anti-longevity effect, that it can increase the rate at which your telomeres shorten. It could potentially increase your risk for cancer if you overdo it. So I'm careful that I'm not just like constantly, I have a lot of paleo friends who are like bacon and eggs for breakfast and fish for lunch and steak for dinner. I don't do that. I eat a lot of plants, dark leafy greens, tomatoes and carrots and cucumbers. And I have a lot of avocados and olive oil and avocado oil and seeds and nuts, from cashews to almonds to macadamia nuts. And I throw in some dark berries here and there, like some blueberries and some raspberries and blackberries. And, I throw in a little bit of coconut milk and some coconut flakes, a little bit of dark chocolate, a little bit of red wine. But meat is not like it's not a staple in my diet. If you look at my diet, it's mostly plants with a lot of
cool.
oils and seeds and nuts. And then, a little bit of fruit thrown in here and there. But, meat is not even a huge component of my diet, the same way that soy is not a huge component of my diet.
I didn't know that. So are you having, though, seafood and chicken and pork, though, like every day, let's say, at least some animal source?
Oh, no, maybe once every 2 to 3 days.
Oh, cool. All right. So let's talk about this another topic in here that we are hearing a lot on the media, which is fasting, especially intermittent fasting, right? So who should it do and who should not do in terms of this fasting subject? Because, a lot of people are doing, but I see a lot of problems related to maybe some adrenal fatigue and some, especially with the ladies, right?
I find that the adrenal fatigue is blown out of proportion, frankly. In most cases, the folks who get adrenal fatigue from fasting, they're getting adrenal fatigue for really not because of the fasting, but for two other reasons. One, they're doing way too much exercise in combination with fasting. Okay. So like the women who are taking yoga and Zumba and going on a bike ride and doing body pump, right? And then, they heard fasting helps me to lose fat too. So they're doing that too. And then they're trying to raise their family and drive their cars and run their household. And it's just like stress. And it's not the fasting, it's everything else. And then, the other mistake that people make is they assume that fasting means that you significantly reduce calories. That's not what fasting means. Fasting in many cases simply means you have a restricted feeding window. And what that means is you're giving your gut a break and you're allowing your cells to clean up a little bit. But once you've fasted, you can still eat a lot of food, right? Like I personally eat 3,500 calories a day or so, right? Like in that range. Yeah. But I also fast every day. I fast every day for 12 to 16 hours, meaning that I'll quit eating at night and I'll go, almost 365 days a year, half the day without eating. Granted, a lot of that is while I'm sleeping, but I won't snack after dinner, and then I'll wait 2, 3, 4 hours until after I get up to eat breakfast. And by doing that, I give my gut a break, I give my cells a chance to clean up, I give inflammation a chance to subside, and then I'll still eat and I'll give my body plenty of really good, nourishing, nutrient-dense calories. But I am not constantly snacking, right? Like I generally will eat 3 square meals a day, maximum 4. I'm not eating 5 or 6 or 10 small snacks a day or doing the grazing and the snacking, because fasting and infrequent meal intake can help you with your fat burning and with your metabolic efficiency and with your avoidance of chronically elevating the blood sugar levels over and over again. Now, in addition to that, it's also helpful to occasionally do a 24-hour fast. Some people will even get a lot of health benefit from a week-long water fast. And sure, you could overdo those type of things too, but they're also wonderful for longevity and for cellular cleanup, and for, especially if you have gut issues, giving your gut a big break from constantly having to digest food. But again, use common sense, right? If you decide you're going to do a 24-hour fast from Saturday at lunchtime until Sunday at lunchtime, let's say, so you're going to skip Saturday night dinner and you're going to skip Sunday morning breakfast, for Pete's sake, don't schedule a 90-minute run on Sunday morning, right? Like that's where people make the mistake, is they combine fasting with exercise. Fasting goes well with meditation. Fasting goes well with some easy yoga. fasting goes well with relaxation. Fasting and exercise aren't a good combination. So that's the mistake most people
Yeah,
make. And
I do a 24-hour fasting every time I travel from the USA to Brazil because it's a long trip. So I just have lunch and then just water. And also I don't eat that not so healthy food from the plane. And then I get here in Brazil, I live 7 minutes walking to the beach. So the first thing I do, just, get home and go straight to the beach and jump into the water, and, to also the circadian rhythm and all the earthing benefits. Cool. So thank you so much for talking about the fasting issue and going. And it's related to fasting, also the coffee, right? Because we can have this fatty coffee or like bulletproof coffee in the morning. Does that break the fast, or is it still going when you have just fat in the morning?
it actually, I laugh sometimes when people say they can't figure out why they're not losing weight. They don't even eat breakfast, right? They just start the day with a cup of coffee and they fast. And then I say, well, okay, what kind of coffee? And they're like, well, I'll do the bulletproof coffee with the MCT oil and the, butter and maybe a little like dark cacao powder. And, you can easily consume 600 to 800 calories in a cup of coffee like that. Calories are calories to a certain extent. Okay. And what that means is that, yeah, you're absolutely breaking a fast when you have a cup of fatty coffee. And that counts as a full meal and sometimes more. When you have that cup of coffee, your body uses those fats for energy instead of using your own body fat for energy. So if you're trying to lose weight and you're dumping 600 to 800 calories of butter and coconut oil or MCT oil into your coffee, then you need to realize that that's breakfast. Okay. So you can't do that and then have like bacon and eggs and have a smoothie. You can't do that and say, oh, whatever, I fasted, because it does break the fast to do that. And I personally, there's certainly benefits to that whole coffee approach. For example, when you blend coffee with fats, there are components of coffee that would normally not cause psychoactivity, like cafestol or kaweol, or two components of coffee you normally wouldn't feel at all unless they were to cross the blood-brain barrier in a lipid-soluble format, and they won't do that unless you blend your coffee with fats, right? So it can be kind of like a good cognitive performance hack. Or for something like, prior to an Ironman triathlon, I used to do big cups of that fatty bulletproof coffee because I'd get not just that cognitive effect, but also the fact that a lot of those fats that you get from MCT oil or coconut oil, they bypass digestion and they go straight into ATP and energy production and ketone production. And so it could be a cool way to like get a lot of fuel into your body all at once. But it's certainly not a low calorie approach. And so I do a cup of coffee, or two every morning, but it's very few and far between that I put fats in the coffee. Generally for me, breakfast is more of like a green plant-based smoothie, just because, I blend it really thick because I like to eat my meals slowly, and just, drinking, hundreds and hundreds of calories all at once is just not something that really appeals to me. And yeah, it is certainly something you need to be aware of, is that, it does have a lot of calories, and it definitely does, to answer your question,
Cool.
break a fast. So yeah.
Awesome. Ben, I was talking to my friend. His name is Giacomo here in Brazil, and Giacomo is a MMA fighter. And last week he posted a picture on Instagram, and he was in a bathtub, but was cold water. And all the comments here was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing to yourself? You're crazy!" And he was like just having the whole explanation, the scientific explanation about cold thermogenesis and about the benefits. So let's talk about this cold thermogenesis and how can we use this to lose weight.
Well, I mean, it's theoretically a very simple concept when it comes to fat loss. If your body has to keep itself warm, one of the primary ways that your body keeps itself warm is it burns calories to generate heat. And so if you're burning calories to generate heat, and especially if you're in a fasted state, or you're not overdoing the number of calories that you eat, a cold shower or a cold bath or a cold water soak or a cold swim can be a very good way to significantly accelerate your metabolic rate. Even more so if you get yourself to the point where the water is cold enough, or you're in the water long enough to where you begin, for example, shivering. That can be a really, really good way to not just increase metabolism, but also increase the conversion of regular white adipose tissue into brown adipose tissue. Brown adipose tissue is a different type of fat tissue. It's very metabolically active, and it burns calories to generate heat. So there are a huge number of benefits that go above and beyond just an increase in metabolism and an increase in calorie burning when you allow your body to be frequently exposed to cold temperatures. For example, you get an increase in nitric oxide, which causes vasodilation and increased oxygen delivery to tissues. You get a decrease in cytokines and inflammation, which can accelerate recovery. Or strengthen the immune system. You get increased production of special shock proteins that increase your resilience to stress, whether that be relationship stress or emotional stress or exercise stress. The list goes on and on. I have many podcasts on my website devoted to simply, how to do it and when you would want to do it. But frankly, it's something that I do every day. I take a cold shower at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, every day. And I also do like some kind of a cold soak or a cold water swim at least a couple of times a week. And I'm a huge fan of not just cold, but also heat, right? Like saunas and infrared and things that make you sweat and that open up the pores and that increase the production of heat shock proteins and nitric oxide in a different way, and blood flow and metabolic efficiency, and even the production of new red blood cells, which can really help athletes out. So again, that combination of cold exposure multiple times during the week and then also heat exposure can be really beneficial for anybody from a metabolic standpoint.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading a book, you said that you were swimming on a cold water, I think, for 2 weeks, and you were like, I was sure I was just burning calories a lot because I was so cold every day there. And the same here in Brazil, right now the cold here is, the water here is a little cold, and I make sure I go in every day too.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Ben, my last question here for you is in terms of supplementation, do you have any favorites? I mean, you mentioned a lot of ones for specific situations, specific goals. In terms of weight loss, what comes to your mind when you think about supplements?
Well, for weight loss, the first thing that you need to understand is that most of the evidence and the studies that have been done on supplementation for weight loss only give someone an extra 5% or so of an increase in metabolic rate, or an increase in fat burning, or say like a stabilization of blood sugar levels that would lead to a significant loss in body fat. Nothing replaces low-level physical activity throughout the day and ensuring that you're not eating too many calories when it comes to weight loss. I mean, those are two of the biggies. And then, of course, like little things like stress and light and household cleaning chemicals and the type of air that you breathe and your personal care products, all of that comes into play as well. But let's say that you've got all of that sorted and you just want to lose fat even faster. Yeah, there are things that can help. One thing you want to be aware of is that constantly elevated blood sugar levels can lead to a conversion of sugars into triglycerides and fats in the liver and a deposition of adipose tissue. And so there are things you can take prior to a meal to lower the blood sugar response to that meal, especially if that meal has a lot of protein or a lot of carbohydrates in it. Bitter melon extract and cinnamon are two really good supplements for that, for any big meal or any meal that contains an appreciable amount of carbohydrates. For fasted workouts, for mobilizing fatty acid, the components in green tea and also the components in coffee can help out quite a bit for that. So that would be like a morning fat loss supplement to take prior to like a fasted cold soak, for example. That would be a really good 1-2 combo for something like that. When you consider that stress can have a significant impact on cortisol levels and also a significant impact on your ability to be able to lose weight, certain things that help to mitigate stress, wild plant components called adaptogens, things like ashwagandha, eleuthero, ginkgo biloba. There's a variety of different adaptogens out there, but a lot of these can help your body deal with stress and can also indirectly help with
Right.
fat loss. So, I would say that if you were just to choose two, if I could just choose two things to take to enhance fat loss and I could choose them, what I would take personally would be a concentrated green tea extract, and I would take that in a fasted state in the morning. And then a bitter melon extract, which actually acts very, very similar to the diabetic drug metformin for controlling blood sugar. And I would take that prior to my biggest carbohydrate containing meal of the day, which is typically dinner. So those would be probably the two best ones to take from a supplementation standpoint.
Cool. Awesome. Ben, is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with us regarding weight loss or just health in general?
I just updated my book. So if you go to beyondtrainingbook.com, I've got a big 450 plus page book full of, tips and hacks and strategies and workouts for everything from performance to digestion to fat loss to brain to sleep to sex to longevity. So I'd say, definitely check that out if you want some more of this type of stuff. And, so that one's called Beyond Training, and you should be able to find it on Amazon and stuff too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, where can people find you? And so what's next for you? What have you been working on today, lately?
Just basically living life to the fullest, hanging out with my kids, taking care of the goats and the chickens and the house, and so then of course
Awesome,
still training for hunting, training for triathlon, training for spearfishing, training for obstacle racing, training for kickboxing, training for tennis, just basically trying to experience life to the fullest.
Cool. Man, thank you so much for being here with us today. I super appreciate the time, man.
Awesome.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Brazilian Health Nut Show. Go to www.brazilianhealthnut.com for much more information about how to burn fat for the rest of your life. Hasta luego.